This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Yotam Ben Ezra, who's Chief Product Officer for Dig Security, and we're talking about data security and the lack thereof because, well, I guess we're still obsessed with the network perimeter. Yotam, welcome to the show.
Hi, happy to be here.
We've been talking about data security for as long as I can remember, but it doesn't ever seem to get much better because, well, security people seem to be focused still on the perimeter and they think somebody else is securing the data, and the people who are creating the data don't think about security at all. So how can this situation get any better?
Well, I think organizations are experiencing an explosion in whatever data means when they move to the cloud. And so the number of data stores that organizations are facing today across the different clouds they're using, the different data services, everyone is using micro services. So each microservice interacts with their own data store. And so the number of data assets that the organization has today is simply staggering across managed data assets, unmanaged data assets, and databases as a service. And so I think it's not only the fact that people have forgotten about data security, but the nature of the environment has changed. And so the problem is moving a little bit.
Traditional approaches to cybersecurity don't seem to work. So what do we need to be doing differently? I think a lot of folks are trying to apply legacy mindsets to what essentially is a new computing environment, whether it's virtual machines in the cloud, or as you just described, all these cloud native environments. But what fundamentally needs to change?
Yeah, so I think traditional data security is around either the endpoints or the network, as you mentioned in the beginning, and those simply don't really scale to the cloud environment. And so, of course, there is no real perimeter. There is a lot of areas or places in the cloud where you cannot deploy an agent. And so some different approaches needed in terms of understanding the answers to a few fundamental questions. So effectively, most organizations today don't have good answers to the question, first, where is my data? What kind of data do I own in the cloud? How is that data moving? Who is consuming that data? How is it flowing across the organization? And then eventually, how do I secure it from data exfiltration, data misuse, compliance breaches, and all of the bad things that can happen? Now, as you mentioned, there are dedicated solutions for protecting our endpoints with EDRs, protecting our networks with NDRs, but there's never been a dedicated solution such as DDR to protect our data. And so I think the focus on a data-centric approach in terms of understanding the answers to all of those questions is something that is well called for.
Who is in charge of that? Because the people who create the data don't seem to think much about security, and yet they have a better understanding of what data might be more valuable than others, and it's hard for a security team to kind of understand or appreciate that. So how do we need to kind of organize ourselves going forward to achieve that goal?
Well, what we see happening in organization is kind of a return of the data security team. So definitely organizations are starting to think about and build data security teams out of the security team. So those will be ones which are responsible for protecting data, for complying with data regulation, sometimes a little bit with privacy. So we will see either a part of the cloud security team, which is responsible for data security, or in large organizations, a proper data security team being built today.
This assumes that I have some ability to monitor the data itself. So how does that get achieved in the cloud where I can't necessarily, put a lot of resources in place, or I may not have permissions or whatever else I require?
Yeah, so that is exactly why we've built Dig, or why I've joined Dig. I've selected to join Dig, and it's that huge problem of understanding the answer to these questions and having a platform which can make it easy to actually do it. And today, things like that, we simply don't have the tools to monitor. So if you think about all of the interactions which happen legitimately in organization, even if you manage your security posture with data 100%, which no organization actually does, but even if you did, we actually have to grant legitimate access to thousands of entities today in the cloud environment, whether it's customers, it can be our own developers, it can be applications or vendors, but essentially data is moving across thousands of instances of data stores, across thousands of entities in a normal enterprise organization. And that access goes completely unmonitored. We simply don't have the tools or didn't have the tools today to figure it out. And so Dig monitors all data interactions, whether it's connections, admin events, data events, and protects data in real time. And there are interesting stories of what organizations find out once we connect and start monitoring those interactions.
We have seen the new national cybersecurity strategy document from the Biden administration. It calls for more accountability of how data is managed, among other things. What impact do you think that's going to have?
Oh, we definitely see a growing awareness as a result of those regulations across the globe. So also across different countries, new privacy or data security regulations mandating organizations to take better care of the data they are holding, either for their customers or for their business. And that definitely drives a higher awareness in terms of understanding and securing with an awareness or a data-centric approach.
Will artificial intelligence play a larger role in all this as we go forward? It seems like every time we turn around, somebody is applying AI to security. So what role will we see this as things evolve?
I think that as the space evolves, we'll be able to see more and more ability to apply a business context into the data. And that might be a good room for artificial intelligence. So the first question is, what data do I even own? Does this data need to comply with a certain regulation or a certain standard, as you mentioned? Like, am I processing payment information, which means I have to adhere to some PCI regulation and so on? But then there are a lot of additional questions that can be asked towards how does that data match what business processes in my organizations? And I think that the better we understand the business processes across the data that we own, the better we can manage its security.
Given all that, what's your best advice to organizations then about how to approach this and think about this? What do you see them doing today that just makes you shake your head?
So I think an interesting approach to maybe tackling this question is around, opening your eyes, because I'll tell you a story. We onboarded one of the larger financial organizations in the US to the platform. And they essentially in one day started understanding what happens with their data. And what we saw is that there was an automated procedure in that environment, a cron job, essentially, which was copying the financial data of that company to an AWS account which was not theirs. Now, that happened every 24 hours for 3 years, 3 whole years. Now, how can that happen? Simply because no one monitors that type of interaction, and we didn't have the tools until that day to monitor that interaction. I'll say, by the way, it was a former employee, which was decided that they needed to keep seeing the data. But for 3 whole years, they had their data leaving the organization on a daily basis, and no one was showing. So as soon as you open your eyes to essentially start understanding how data is moving across the organization, that brings to light a lot of things that we call them oh shit moments in some cases.
All right, folks. Well, you heard it here. Seems like we're not focused enough on the core asset we're trying to protect, which is the data. We seem to be protecting using the traditional castles and moats kind of mindset, but the roof is wide open. So maybe we need a whole different approach. Hey, Yotam, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.